morning, everybody. Have you had your coffee? Are you awake? I've been up since 6 o'clock, had like 3 cups of coffee. I've got a sinus infection, and so I'm ready to go now. I'm pumped up with drugs. So anyway, I'm Sandra Leekons. I'm VP of Information Security and Data Governance at Choice Properties REIT. You probably shop at one of our leased locations. Sherry?
Sherry Rumbold, some of you know me. I spent 21 years in the Army. I'm IT and I work for the Government of Canada, and I'm on a very important project for the Government of Canada to, I think, overhaul HR and pay for the government. And I work with a fabulous team, and it's just so wonderful to show up every day and know that you're doing something great for citizens of Canada.
Okay. And Bonnie?
Good morning, Bonnie Butlin. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Security Partners Forum. We created an agile network of security professional associations, institutes, and professionals around the world. We work with hundreds of associations across all domains and disciplines of security. And my own background is a strategic analyst and focusing on military doctrine strategy and grand strategic conflict. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to have 3 sections. We're going to talk about data sovereignty. We're going to talk about geopolitics, as well as AI, because everything's AI today. So from a data sovereignty perspective, do we really have, Sherry, do we really have a clear understanding, where our data resides, how much autonomy we have? Do we have control? What are your thoughts on that?
I'd like to think so in Canada, because we do have what we call hard localization of data, which means that most of our data, like especially if you're a governing body, it has to reside in Canada. I mean, whether or not you have a data center, you're working with partners from all over the world, there is a certain type of standard that we have to follow in terms of policy. But again, too, like in the world now of cloud-hosted solutions, we have, sort of interconnections and APIs and everything everywhere. Do we really have that traceability? And I think that is something that everybody should be mindful of, especially if you're protecting a network, if you're looking at all into your cybersecurity platforms. What is it? Where's your data? How are you actually protecting that, and have an understanding of where that resides? So ask the tough questions to the vendors, especially if you're, hosted with a lot of cloud vendors, and look at what that looks like. So connectivity patterns, because I do architecture as well. So look at your patterns of connectivity. Where is your data centers? Where is your databases? Where is everything residing? Because, vendors also are not necessarily in Canada. They have a data center probably in Canada. We have sovereignty and residency requirements, but oftentimes folks cannot truly say that they know exactly where that is. So it's like a needle in a haystack in some cases.
100%. 100%. Bonnie, do you have any thoughts on that? Or how about adding, the challenges from a jurisdictional perspective, the complexity, the reliance on global suppliers, the evolving security threats that we have ongoing?
Yeah, I think it's a tough neighborhood right now, because Canada is, I think, a little late to the table. Other countries have been really focusing on protecting the data for their citizens, whether it's GDPR. China has a very similar law now to protect the data and information of Chinese citizens in China. Russia as well. They've been working very intensely on smart cities. They actually now have people living in smart cities, but they have legislation that protects the data of those people in the smart cities, and with 3-year sunset clauses, for example. So it's going to be difficult for Canada moving forward, I think, on a global level, because we have so many agreements with so many different countries, and we're trying to diversify right now at the political level, which means we're working more with China. We have agreements with China now which aren't really that clear to the public, and I think that's all going to roll into what it's going to look like for companies and Canadians moving forward. We're in a little bit of a gray area between all these different pieces of legislation as we try to develop our own.
And what about privacy? Privacy is something that we have to deal with every day. You've got security, you have privacy, and they overlap. And I think, sometimes you have two different departments, two different governing bodies, and they're at loggerheads at times. And then you actually throw in data governance as part of that, and it's a whole big party trying to decide what you should do about the data. Any comments, Sherry?
I think that, like privacy and security needs to balance somehow. So that means that having, personally, I think that the relationship has to be pretty strong between both privacy professionals and security professionals, because we're looking at securing the data, they're looking at the privacy of the data and making sure that that data is not in one way or the other shared, or the PII is not leaked or whatever. So, we work, in the government of Canada for sure, and other companies that I've worked for, we work really, really hand in hand with privacy and security professionals, because it's really important. They need to do their PIAs and their, information sharing agreements and all of these things. So they are putting into sort of context and like policy what the guidelines are for privacy and how we actually are going to distribute and manage that data. For security, we need to secure that so that nobody gets at the data, right? So it's really a partnership, it's a handshake, we need to always work together. It doesn't necessarily always work that way, but again, I think we talked about that a little bit last night, and that's like building those relationships, and it's not those silos anymore. Like, we cannot work in a world of silos. It just doesn't work. And we need to all be on deck whenever there's like a situation. So we need to practice that in our companies, in government, everywhere. And we need to make sure that we actually build those relationships with, yes, our coders, down the hall and all of the other folks. So, it's really important to understand the business of your colleagues in a way. Not saying that you got to be an expert, but understand and know what it is that you're actually, what they're doing, what their passion areas are, and then try to find that sort of middle ground so that we don't have gaps. Because when we start to have gaps, that's where the problem lies, right? Because that's where the vulnerabilities are.
Okay. And Bonnie?
And I'd like to take off of that point, which is, it's not just privacy, it's also trust and confidence, of the public to actually go along with having large data sections, large pools of data. So, for example, the Aadhaar system in India, which collects biometric data on over 1 billion people, had some issues where some of that data was getting leaked out and even found on the dark web. And so this is a problem of confidence and trust of the public. We saw the same thing in the UK, which is trying to bring in the digital ID. And that was not hacked directly, but there were parts of that information that also went out off of utilities in the background and off of the government portal in another way. And so it's privacy, it's control of your information, and it's not letting the technology get out too far ahead of the public's willingness to accept and trust in it, because the damage on the back end can be very severe. And I'm not sure we have that balance right at this time, given, particularly in the context of global initiatives that occurred before what we're trying here.
So then from a policy perspective, from a global level, so how do we navigate, the changing world that we're in from a cybersecurity perspective? You open up the newspaper, you look, still sometimes read a real newspaper, but there are, news outlets. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, no, I open up my feed in the morning and I see what's happening in the world, and it's surprising. Every day there's something new that is happening, whether it's, whatever is going on. I don't have to say, you probably opened up the news this morning and you saw what's going on in the world. So how do we deal with cybersecurity from that perspective? Because it is changing every day. You have new threat actors on a global level. You've got geopolitical conflicts going on. We came through COVID and we thought, oh my goodness, COVID, and then all the ransomware, the phishing, all of those things, really went off the charts at that point. And now we're into the geopolitical aspect of the world right now. So, any thoughts?
Oh boy, I think that we're in a very uncharted territory these days, and I think that too, like all of the things that we thought we knew in terms of how we work with others, and then that sort of sense of security, if you will, excuse the pun, but I mean, we kind of had some idea of what the rules of engagement were, but I think that right now the rules of engagement is, well, not there. And I think that we need to understand what that looks like. So, I mean, again, it's going back to the basics. So you need to understand how to protect your data, your information, wherever you're working, whatever it is that you're doing. You need to sort of still have an idea and sort of, I guess, an eye on your prize and to keep securing and making sure that everything that you're doing is still on track. Because the threats are going to come no matter what. And they're going to come in many different ways. And it's going to come when you least expect it. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go to the boring old whatever, my 35 years of information security. And that is go back to the basics and protect your systems. Have your backups ready. Have everything ready at the ready. Test your BCPs and your DRPs and your BIAs and all of the other things. And make sure that you have everything in place because guess what? You just don't know what's around the corner. I mean, we should understand that from even COVID, as you mentioned,
Yep.
and that is like it really catapulted us into a very different landscape. And some of us had to rapidly, get everybody back to work, essentially, and give them some form of remote tooling to be able to do their jobs and stuff. And we had to do that like right away. So I know that people can assemble and move quickly. But if we have something that's more globally or, I would say spread out, multi-nation issues, I think that then we're going to have a problem. Because we have a reliance still on our partners and other countries to help us, manage some of our systems and whatnot. So we need to understand what is going to happen if we have a D-Day kind of situation. And if we do, we better understand how we're going to get our systems back up and running and that data is protected. So the threats are there. What are they? Well, I mean, just pick one. Like there's like so many. And we just need to kind of like be on top of that. I mean, we could all look at our newspapers, Sandra, and get really, really scared every morning.
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, we got to stay focused on what it is that we have to do as security professionals and hopefully align with the business and all these other things and make sure that we're protecting what we need to protect. So not get too carried away with the noise.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I think when you say go back to the basics, and I've been around for the last 30 years in information security.
My friend, my long
Yes.
friend here.
and I think it's really, really important to go back to those basics
Yeah.
because people forget about the basics. And it's also about integrating into the infrastructure teams, the apps teams. Security is not a silo. We have to be a partner. You have to be embedded into those processes. Because if you look at it from an operations management perspective, you could have established all the controls, but have they actually implemented it? Are they operational? Are they being tested? Are you testing those things on a regular basis and knowing that your alerts actually work? Without that, same with business continuity plans. If you don't have them in place, we're seeing more and more, power outages happen, conflicts happen, ransomware happen. Can you sustain a prolonged outage for 2 or 3 months? Can the business?
I'd like to take off on that one. I think we're seeing that everything has changed because the way of war, the way the grand strategies have been playing out between Russia, China, and the US, and how they have been competing, that whole system has failed. And we're starting to see attempts at a breakout strategy that may succeed the way the other ones have not. So as China, Russia, and the US have been competing, with the US through Cities Trap, the US is declining relative to the others are rising. We're seeing that the breakout strategies that have been tried, regime change, sanctions, fintech warfare, canceling Russia, the war in Ukraine, and there are others, they haven't succeeded to date. And I think what we're seeing now is the emergence of a new strategy to try and compete, and that is cybersecurity and cyber warfare. And I think we're going to see that we can't go for the escalation to nuclear warfare. We don't have the money or the means to fight conventional warfares. Air power is not working anymore. And so I think what we're seeing is the West break out into a sub-conflict in the cybersecurity space. And there's quite a bit of evidence that this is happening right now. And we're going to see these events like attacks just under that surface of international armed conflict and trying to prevent it from escalating to full conflict, but using a model that's more like submarine warfare, just under the surface, just at the conflict level, but not breaching above it, and yet attacking through cyber and cybersecurity means. And so we're going to see those attacks on infrastructure. We're going to see the attack on resources. We're already seeing a lot of the oil and gas facilities go up. We're seeing other facilities that are key nodes being attacked. But like submarine warfare, it's very hard to attribute to any country an attack. It's very hard to determine that there was intent behind that attack, making it an armed conflict issue. And I think we're going to see that this strategy that's low casualty, not an armed conflict on land, not air power, is going to happen without us knowing. And that's going back to your comment, what are we seeing in the papers? I think the issue is more, what are we not seeing in the paper? We're going back to opaque, quiet, out of the public eye conflict. And hope that it doesn't escalate.
Do we really have any evidence of that, though?
We do.
In Canada?
We do, yes.
Okay.
So, for example, the Canada-Ukraine strategic partnership that was signed in 2023 committed Canada to cybersecurity, not cyber warfare, not information warfare, cybersecurity as part of conflict in Ukraine for the next 10 years. This is consistent with what the US and Russia and China have been doing, which is a longer, persistent cyber conflict, persistent approach over time, even in peacetime. We see it also in the Tallinn Manual, which is a compilation of laws that would affect the cyber warfare space. We're now seeing it, interestingly, in the Newport Manual. The Newport Manual, especially the second edition, which just came out in 2025, talks about the law of naval warfare, but specifically about cyber attacks.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I was at National Defense for like 26 years. So, I mean, I kind of understand like some of the things that they're doing and some of the areas in which they're focusing and all that stuff. But I think that we got to kind of like, just not make people nervous about things and sort of like, let's just say that we got the right people in the right place doing the right things. Yeah. And I think that it's probably okay to sort of keep it at that.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with that, because the conflict now, and we see it in Tallinn Manual 1, 2, and the Tallinn Mechanism now, which moves from warfare with cyber attacks to peacetime with Tallinn Manual 2, and now with the Tallinn Manual, the Tallinn Mechanism now moves into civilian engagement. And so these things are moving into the civilian, into the peacetime area. And I don't think that keeping it from the public is going to help companies and Canadians or people in other countries prepare for this kind of infrastructure resource, under the surface, opaque kind of conflict, persistent, even in peacetime, that we're seeing endorsed by multiple great powers, and we're seeing it affect us on the ground. I think that companies and citizens need to be aware that this is happening under the surface, because it is not being reported on, and it's not being shared with these people to prepare appropriately, in my opinion.
So how about we pivot into AI, because that's like the latest, greatest thing. We've all heard about Claude Mythos, escaped for several days. We've got, top 50 vendors trying to deal with vulnerabilities, and, it's taking longer and longer to actually update our systems every week because the patches are getting so big. But, AI is really reshaping what our defenses are, because we used to have hours to be able to respond to things. Now it's no longer hours. In some cases, it's only minutes. And so, are we still focusing on depth in defense? Like, how, from a strategy perspective, what should we be doing? What should the practitioners in the room really be looking out for? And how do we move forward in this crazy new world?
Well, I mean, things like you said are moving very fast,
Yeah.
And I think we have to keep up. I mean, we need to innovate. We need to understand, how AI is going to help the business in whatever capacity that you have, and also too, there are opportunities there to sort of give us a little bit more, I guess, like flexibility in how we do things, and then also it will speed up certain processes. So I mean, there's a purpose, right? There's a purpose, and there's a reason why we have AI, and we want to have AI. So I mean, we have to have that balance again between AI technology, understanding, from a threat perspective, what potentially could happen depending on how you're actually using AI, and then where it is in your environment, right? Mm-hmm. So again, too, we have, a lot of people talk about shadow IT and whatnot, but I mean, really, we're using AI bots almost everywhere, in almost every type of SaaS solution or whatever that we have. So understanding that, and hopefully you're monitoring something in terms of making sure that there's no compromise, or things are not, AI is not going to compromise you, but I mean that you're actually not using it for something that's actually illicit in any way, and that we're not actually, I don't know what to say, basically making sure that it's not going to harm the business, I guess. I think I went off there on a different tangent because I was looking at the clock.
Yes.
But anyways, I mean, we still have to have our defense in depth principles in
Yes.
order. I think that this is an opportunity for us everywhere, and in cybersecurity as well, to leverage AI tools and technology to help us as well. We just have to understand what that is.
Okay, Bonnie?
Yeah, AI is, it's doing a few things right now, I think of particular note at a higher level, and it's actually pushing or driving security up to higher strategic consideration and level. AI, if you consider it one way, is a higher strategic treatment than cybersecurity. AI is of strategic importance to, for example, the board of directors of organizations and companies, because it affects so many different parts of your business. And AI, I mean, it's already playing into the complexity of conflict as it drives up strategic importance. I mean, we saw it with Anthropic and Mythos itself, where Anthropic, after the invasion of Venezuela and the capture of Maduro, Anthropic no longer wanted to contribute its systems and product to the special operations forces that were involved. That led the United States to consider Anthropic as no longer a trusted supply chain member. So just because you're producing what is, for all intents and purposes, a private sector product or service, and you're working with the public sector, doesn't mean you might not find yourself offside or disagreeing at some point. So AI is getting quite complex in that area. But I think the strategic treatment of AI is also increasing quite dramatically, because it's blending the private and the public sector in other ways. I mean, we're seeing it in drone warfare. We're seeing it in the war with Iran, with the Amazon data centers in the UAE, and one in Bahrain being hit because they were used in the war effort as well. So that kind of, again, that surface level, not quite rising to full war, but hanging out just under the surface and operating, is where AI is becoming incredibly complex, and I don't think, again, we're having enough public discussions on this to fully understand what it's going to mean, but it's operating at the higher level. And I would argue AppSec, because it is dealing with these persistent threats, because it's dealing with the most critical prevented losses. And if you look at the economics of cybersecurity, you have increasing sophistication of actions, dealing with controls, incidents, controls, vulnerabilities, incidents, prevented losses. This is where cybersecurity and application security in particular is going to be preventing losses of a strategic, if not grand strategic effort. And that is, I think, exceeding even where China and Russia might be with strategic treatment of traditional security disciplines. So fascinating space.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. I think we're actually running over time. So I just wanted to, from a takeaway perspective, so we've had two very different views of things. You know, I look at it from a practitioner perspective. I'm really, you know, the rubber hits the road. So what do I need to do to protect my organization? So I really think it's important to pay attention to all of your contracts. You know, we don't ever do enough due diligence on that. Look at the data residency, the resiliency that is built into it as well. The vendor's use of AI, where is your data going? So all of those things are critical to understand. Also, update your BCP plans. Make sure you have the ability to sustain a prolonged outage and ensure you have multiple backups of your data. Okay, that's it. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much. Thank you.